So I happened to be there in Israel too.
And so I was on a pilgrimage with my mom in Israel, and I turned around and I saw someone who looked super familiar.
Let everyone see what true evil is. This is something that could impact a generation and generations to come.
Does anyone else think this is Erika Kirk putting in fake tears into her eyes?
Y'all, this Erika Kirk Israeli honeypot story just got way more sinister.
It began on a night too quiet for peace. The rain fell soft against the glass, and inside the King family's immaculate home, the only light came from a single glowing screen. Lila King hadn't meant to look. She was just syncing her brother's files before his next speech, but when the folder appeared, marked Erika Archive, curiosity felt a lot like instinct. What she found inside were not sermons or schedules. They were messages, hundreds of them, words from Charles King, the man the world worshipped for his faith and integrity, to the woman he claimed to adore. But these messages weren't love letters, they were evidence. Cold, careful, manipulative, every line a blueprint for the image he'd built. Every promise another brick in a house of lies. Lila read in silence, her breath shallow, her heart breaking and hardening all at once. The man who preached loyalty on stages had turned it into a transaction behind closed doors. The brother who once told her truth was sacred had buried his beneath strategy and control. And when the realization hit that she had been part of the machine that protected his image, something inside her cracked. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Inside, her shaking hands hovered over the keyboard. For the first time, she wasn't his sister. She was the witness. And before the sun rose, she would become something else entirely. The reason his empire fell. By morning, the world still believed in Charles King. He was their symbol of certainty, the man who stood behind pulpits and podiums, telling millions that virtue wasn't dead, that family could still be sacred. His face filled banners. His voice echoed through radio stations. His quotes were printed beneath filtered portraits of perfection. Every word he spoke sounded measured, righteous, safe. He was what people wanted to believe in. Behind the curtains, though, that perfection had a script. Charles didn't just live his truth, he marketed it. His speeches were rehearsed down to the pause. His faith was polished for cameras. Each smile, each prayer, each family photograph was planned like a campaign poster. To his followers, he was conviction personified. To those closest to him, he was a man who'd forgotten where conviction ended and performance began. Erika King played her role flawlessly, poised, composed, the model wife. Together, they were the portrait of virtue. Yet, even in photos, there was a distance between them. A fraction of a second where her eyes looked somewhere else. Away from the lens, away from him. Those who noticed called it exhaustion. Those who didn't called it elegance. But Lila saw it. She saw everything. In private, Charles was colder, quieter, as if the world had drained him. He spoke less to people and more to screens. He justified the deceit in his mind as protection. The greater good. The image that kept the message alive. If the truth broke him, the cause would fall too, he told himself. But lies have a way of forgetting who they're protecting. Every empire, no matter how sanctified, starts to rot from the inside first. And the man who spent his life preaching about light was already being swallowed by his own shadow. Lila King had spent her entire life orbiting her brother's gravity to the outside world. She was the quiet sibling, the one behind the curtain, the steady hand in the shadows. Where Charles spoke, Lila listened. Where he built, she organized. She handled his schedules, his speeches, the endless flood of emails that kept his empire moving. She knew his habits better than anyone, the words he used to charm a crowd, the tone he reserved for family, the silence that meant danger. For years, she defended him. When critics accused Charles of vanity, Lila called it passion. When old friends said fame had changed him, she laughed it off as jealousy. But beneath her loyalty was unease, a quiet ache she couldn't name. His eyes didn't match his voice anymore. His words, once alive with conviction, now sounded mechanical, hollow. He had become an echo of the man he used to be. The first real crack appeared one evening in the campaign office. Lila was cleaning up after a long meeting when she noticed a phone left on the table, Charles's backup device, unlocked. A notification blinked on screen. You handled her perfectly. The sender's name was hidden under an alias. Her stomach twisted. She told herself not to read it. She did anyway. The message wasn't overtly scandalous, it was strategic, careful, but the subtext hit like ice water. It hinted at deception, manipulation, and worse, awareness. Charles wasn't the victim of temptation. He was the architect of illusion. and he was using the people closest to him as pieces on a chessboard. That night, Lila drove home in silence. She tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Every memory of her brother, his laughter, his promises, his sermons about truth felt counterfeit. For the first time, she saw him not as her hero, but as a stranger wearing his face. Over the next few weeks, her unease turned into quiet investigation. She combed through archived files, old correspondence, internal drives, anything that could prove what her instincts already knew. And with each discovery, the image of Charles King cracked further. What she found in the folder labeled Erika Archive would not only confirm her worst fears, it would set a match to everything they'd built. The night Lila opened the folder, the world outside was asleep, but her pulse wasn't. The office was empty except for the low hum of computers and the flicker of a desk lamp, casting tired gold across the walls. On her screen, the folder name seemed to glow, Erika Archive. Her cursor hovered, trembling, as if even the computer understood the weight of what she was about to do. She clicked once, then twice. Inside were hundreds of messages, some short, some pages long. At first, they looked harmless, meeting reminders, calendar notes, but as she scrolled, the tone shifted, the language grew darker, sharper. There were discussions about image control, emotional manipulation, carefully planned photo ops, and private moments designed for public release. Erika's name appeared again and again, each time wrapped in strategy. Not affection. The deeper she read, the colder she felt. Every word sounded like a rehearsal for deceit, a play written for the cameras. Her brother hadn't been lying by accident. He had built an entire life out of controlled performance. One thread stopped her heart. It was a message from Charles to an unknown contact. Keep her in line. If she starts asking questions, remind her who made her. For a moment, the air left her lungs. Her. That could only mean Erika. The woman everyone saw as his equal was a pawn in his narrative, a prop to hold the illusion together. Lila's hands trembled as she copied the files to her flash drive. She didn't cry, not yet. The betrayal was too big for tears. It wasn't just about a marriage or a lie. It was about the hypocrisy she had helped protect, the faith she had defended on his behalf. When she finally closed the laptop, she saw her own reflection in the dark screen. She looked like a stranger too. Somewhere deep inside, a decision began to form, quiet, steady, irreversible. She whispered to the empty room, "You always said truth sets people free, Charles. Let's see if it sets you free, too." And with that, she pocketed the flash drive, a weapon made of words, and walked out into the storm. For 2 nights, Lila didn't sleep. She'd seen the proof, felt the disgust, and yet her finger still hovered over the upload button like a loaded trigger. If she pressed it, there'd be no taking it back. Every speech, every family photo, every ounce of the life they'd built would go up in flames. She tried to confront Charles once more. He met her eyes without blinking. "Whatever you think you found, you're wrong," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut. When she showed him the messages, he didn't deny them, he smiled. "You don't understand how the world works, Lila. Truth isn't pure, it's strategic." That was the moment she stopped being his sister. Back home, she opened her laptop and watched the cursor blink against a blank screen like a heartbeat waiting for a decision. Rain hammered the windows as she compressed the files, renamed them, and typed a message to an anonymous tip channel. "If truth matters, read this before it disappears." The progress bar crawled across the screen. When it reached 100%, the storm outside seemed to pause, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Minutes later, the first notifications appeared on her phone, screenshots shared, hashtags forming, news accounts picking up the trail. #Kinglik was born. By morning, it would be a wildfire. Lila sat back and stared at the upload confirmation like a death certificate. She'd told herself it was for the truth, for the people who deserved to know. But in the quiet, after the storm, she realized truth wasn't a gift, it was a weapon, and she'd just pulled the pin. Outside, dawn broke over the city as her brother's perfect image shattered across every screen. The message was out, the lie was dead, and the King family would never be the same. By sunrise, the truth had teeth. Every news outlet in the country carried the same headline: "Private messages leak from Charles King's inner circle." The screenshots were everywhere, on televisions, in coffee shops, trending lists on social media, whispered about in office hallways. The man once praised as a moral compass had become a cautionary tale overnight. The first thing Charles saw that morning wasn't the sunrise, it was his reflection on a dozen screens, framed by betrayal. Reporters camped outside his gate, cameras aimed like rifles. His phone exploded with calls from donors, advisors, and journalists, each demanding an explanation he didn't have. Within hours, his empire began to fracture. Sponsors suspended contracts, volunteers resigned. And his name, once synonymous with virtue, became a meme for hypocrisy. Inside the King household, silence roared louder than any headline. Erika sat in the kitchen, scrolling through the leaked messages, her face drained of color. She wasn't angry, just hollow. She'd built a life on partnership, only to discover she'd been cast as a supporting actress in his performance. When Charles finally spoke her name, she didn't look up. "Don't," she said quietly, "not now." Meanwhile, across the city, Lila watched the world unravel from her car. Her phone vibrated non-stop notifications, threats, messages from old friends who suddenly had questions. Some called her brave, others called her a traitor. The internet had made up its mind before she'd even spoken. She was no longer a sister. She was the whistleblower, the betrayer. The headline: Charles's anger came fast. In his first statement, he blamed cyber interference, calling the leaks edited fabrications. But denial only fueled the flames. Fact-checkers debunked him within hours, matching timestamps and metadata. By evening, he'd gone silent, his once confident smile replaced by a clenched jaw and sleepless eyes. And still, the world kept feeding. Every talk show, every late-night host, every gossip page devoured the story. They didn't just expose his lies, they dissected them, word by word, screenshot by screenshot. Until the man who once preached transparency became a ghost, trapped in his own contradictions. For Lila, the victory felt like loss. She had wanted truth to set things right, but the truth, once unleashed, didn't care who it hurt. As the city lights flickered outside her window, she realized something she hadn't expected. You don't just burn a lie, you burn with it. The headlines had been brutal, but what came next was worse: silence. Inside the King family's estate, no one spoke. The mansion that once hosted prayer circles and charity dinners now felt like a mausoleum filled with ghosts that still had names. Charles moved through the halls, like a man already buried, his footsteps echoing against the marble. Every sound reminded him of what he'd lost, not the cameras or the stage, but the trust that had made him human. He blamed Lila for it all. He told himself that if she hadn't interfered, the truth could have been managed. He repeated that word to himself. Managed, like it was mercy instead of manipulation. Lila stayed away for days, knowing the moment she saw him, everything she'd done would become real. But when their mother called, crying and broken, she came home. The house looked the same, but it felt poisoned. He was waiting for her in their father's study. The curtains were drawn. His face was pale, but his eyes were burning. "Why?" he asked, voice low and trembling. "Why would you destroy your own blood?" She wanted to scream that he'd destroyed himself, that she'd only revealed what was already dying, but the words tangled in her throat. "Because someone had to stop you," she whispered. "Someone had to remember who you used to be." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "You think truth makes you righteous? All you've done is feed the vultures. You think they'll ever stop?" Her eyes filled, but she didn't flinch. "Maybe not, but at least they're eating what's real." The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Outside the door, their mother prayed under her breath, hands shaking. Their father sat on the porch, staring at nothing. The family name King no longer meant power. It meant fracture. When Lila left that night, she knew she wasn't welcome anymore. Her mother didn't hug her. Her father didn't meet her eyes. And Charles, standing in the doorway, said only one sentence: "I hope the truth keeps you warm." She didn't answer. She just walked into the cold, the wind biting against her tears. Behind her, the home she'd grown up in flickered in the darkness, a kingdom, collapsing from the inside out. For the first time in her life, Lila wasn't running from her brother's shadow. She was walking away from it. Months passed, but the echo of the scandal refused to fade. The media moved on to newer controversies, but for the King family, time had frozen on the day everything broke. Their last name, once spoken with admiration, now carried a quiet weight, a warning. Every public mention felt like a scar reopening. Charles King vanished from the stage that had once made him untouchable. His organization folded under debt and shame. His followers scattered to safer idols. Some still called him a victim of betrayal. Others called him the architect of his own ruin. Both were right. He had built his world on devotion, but devotion built on deception never survives exposure. He retreated to a rented farmhouse at the edge of the state, where no cameras followed. Every morning, he watched the sunrise and wondered when silence had started to feel like punishment. The speeches still lived in his head, the cadence, the conviction, the lies disguised as wisdom. He'd once believed his words could move nations. Now, he couldn't move past his own reflection. Lila lived quietly too. Different city, different name, no trace of the life she'd known. Some nights she woke up in a panic, hearing phantom phone alerts, the sound of the leak going live. She tried to convince herself she'd done the right thing, but right and ruin looked too similar in hindsight. The truth had freed her brother's followers, and imprisoned her in guilt. She kept one flash drive, the original copy of the files, locked in a small tin box under her bed. She never opened it again, not because she feared what was inside, but because she already knew. Truth didn't erase pain, it simply outlasted it. Their parents rarely spoke publicly, but once, in a small-town interview, their mother said something that lingered in every retelling. "We raised them to tell the truth. We just never thought they'd have to tell it about each other." The family had no reunion, no reconciliation, just distance, the kind that grows between people who loved each other too deeply to forget, and hurt each other too much to forgive. In the end, there were no heroes, no villains, just survivors, each one carrying a version of the truth that still burned, even after the world stopped watching. Winter had come early. The city outside Lila's window was draped in fog, every streetlight haloed by cold mist. She lived quietly now, a ghost among strangers, the kind of woman who never looked up when people whispered her name. The world had moved on, but her story had not. The truth had been told, yet peace never came. That night, her laptop screen flickered awake on its own. A new email sat in her inbox. No sender, no subject, just one line. You only knew half of it. Her pulse quickened. Attached was a single file, archive_2. For a long time, she stared at it, the cursor hovering like a dare. Her first instinct was fear. The second was curiosity, that dangerous, familiar voice that had started everything. When she finally clicked, the screen filled with messages. Not from Charles this time, from Erika, hundreds of them. The same careful phrasing, the same tone of control, but these weren't replies. They were commands, instructions, traps. Lila's breath caught. The pattern was unmistakable. The manipulation hadn't begun with Charles, it had started long before, and someone else had been pulling the strings. Erika wasn't the victim of the story. She might have been its author. The screen dimmed as thunder rolled outside. Lila's reflection stared back at her, pale and trembling. She whispered to the empty room, "Oh God." It wasn't just him. The email vanished seconds later, deleted itself. Gone. She sat there, frozen, realizing that maybe the truth she thought she'd freed was only half the story, and that somewhere out there, someone was still watching. The last frame fades to black. Text on screen. Every truth has another version, coming soon. The archive. They said blood is thicker than water, but sometimes, blood is the first thing spilled. The truth was never the ending. It was only the beginning. He found out too late. The archive chapter. What would you do if the lie you exposed was only half the story? Like, comment, and subscribe for the next chapter, because every secret you uncover just opens another door.